Welcome, everyone, to the International African American Museum Center for Family History monthly webinars. My name is Shelley Murphy, and I'll be moderating, and we have Whitney Day in the chat, watching the chat room for your questions. But let's start off with a little bit of Charleston trivia, since this museum is located in Charleston, South Carolina. What is the size of a football field and a half? What's located at Gadsden's Wharf? What has 9 galleries? Who has a Center for Family History that provides education programs for both young and old? Who also has membership opportunities? All of these answers can be found at the main website of iaamuseum.org under events. So, what do you know about the Center for Family History? We do have a new director, and he is actually in the audience, and that's Brian Sheffey. So welcome to Brian Sheffey. So look at the list that's provided here. This is what is entailed for the Center for Family History. We've got digital archives. There's a resource center. All of this is online and available for everyone to look at. There's a collection of the United States Colored Troop pension records. We offer one-on-one genealogy consultations Tuesday through Friday. There's a story booth. People that visit the museum can step in and record a 2-minute session about a family member, an ancestor, whatever they want to say, and it gets emailed to them. There's also the listings of the programs and events that the museum is having, as well as the Center for Family History, like these monthly webinars that we offer. And there is the website to visit to go right to the Center for Family History. And folks, you are welcome to take a screenshot of any of these slides that I have on here. So I got a few reminders. You know, the session is being recorded and it will be available at a later date. Please keep yourself muted and turn off your video during the discussion or the presentation. Closed caption is available. And if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. They will be monitored by Whitney, and questions, of course, will be answered after the panelist discussion. So let's welcome our guest today. And again, the topic is the historical footprints, ancestral echoes, and the interplay of historical and lineage societies. Our guests, we have Dr. Evelyn McDowell, who's president of the Sons and Daughters of the U.S. Middle Passage. We have Ms. LaJoy Mosby, president of the African American Historical Genealogical Society, and I'm going to say it this way, known as AAHGS. And then we have Mr. Rick Murphy, and I'm going to do AKA Rick, okay? Listening from your other session. He is the President General of the Society of the First African Families of English America. And this is something that I'm sure a lot of folks don't know about. So we want to get into the conversation. And I'm going to start off with Dr. McDowell. If you would please introduce yourself, your organization, just to get started.
Well, I want to first of all say thank you so much, Shelley, and thank you to the International African American Museum for hosting this. And I am the president and founder of Sons and Daughters of the U.S. Middle Passage. It is a lineage society, one of the first lineage societies for people who are descendant of enslaved people. So the way you get into this organization is you have to identify an enslaved person in your family tree, and then provide documentation supporting yourself to that, connecting yourself to that enslaved ancestor. You would send that information to us, and then we would literally take your information and verify that you were able to do this. And once you're able to do it, you become a member of our organization. It was started in 2013, but we took our first applications in 2016. It even had beginnings, really beginnings in 2011. But we were incorporated in DC. The organization, we put on annual conferences. We do a lot of outreach to the community. We've been around for a while, and we've got a lot of things coming up. So I could go on, but okay. I'm going to go and allow other people to talk.
Okay, we're going to pass it over to the president of AAHGS, LaJoy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, AAM, for including us today. The Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society was formed in 1977 in Washington, D.C., so we are 46 years old. We have 31 active chapters nationwide. We have nearly 2,000 members. We are the old lady in the shoe, so to speak, of the African American genealogy societies. Our goal is that we are not a lineage society, so anyone who has interest in African ancestred genealogy and African American history can become a member of AAHGS. We have, as I indicated, we also have a national conference and have that we just had a really successful one in October of this year. We have virtual programming. We have regular communications with our members from a national point of view. We have our chapters that provide excellent programming, some monthly, some bi-monthly, some quarterly, depending on the chapter. But there is an opportunity for exchange of information, for presentations, webinars. We do collaborations with a variety of national, state, and regional organizations. So I'll stop at that to say, feel free to join us anytime. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Rick?
Dr. Shelley Murphy, thank you for facilitating this. The museum, thank you for hosting this. My name is Rick Murphy. I am the president and founder of the Society of the First African Families of English America. We stand on the shoulders of our ancestors. I had the great fortune of being the first registrar of the Sons and Daughters of the Middle Passage, and from that learned so much about lineage societies and the historical importance. I served as the National Vice President for History for the Afro-American Historical Genealogical Society, and from that understood the importance of history and genealogy around our ancestors. We too are a lineage society. We know that our ancestors, 3/4 of our ancestors were here at the end of the Revolutionary War, which means that they are founders of America, whether they were free, freed, or enslaved. They are the true founders of America. And as a result of that, we look at those ancestors who were here since 1619 to 1783, and we support the research of the lineages of those families. We document those lineages. We peer review those lineages, and we certify those lineages, because we think it's important not only to honor the contributions of our ancestors, but to document that relationship to ourselves, because that is the one thing that we can leave behind for our great, great, great grandchildren, is the importance of family, the importance of lineages, the importance of history, going all the way back to the founding of this nation, the founders of America. So it truly is an honor to be here. It's an honor to stand on the shoulders of the Sons and Daughters of the Middle Passage. It's an honor to stand on the shoulders of the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society. And it's an honor to be here with the museum and its guest and its new leader, Brian Sheffley. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And thank you to all three of you. And so what I'm going to do is do a little bit of round robin with questions and start this discussion. And let's think about the historical context of a lineage society or a historical society. And I'm going to say for African Americans. And those of us, we belong to, and I'm gonna call them the white societies as well. But what about the concept of a lineage society for African Americans and how it originated? Were there historical events that might have sparked it, say AAHGS in 1977, or Dr. McDowell, you said 2013? What happened? And I'll go to Rick also, but what actually happened that made these come about? And I'll go to LaJoy first.
Well, as early as 1970, our founders were meeting to discuss the various aspects of African American genealogical research. They were all primarily members of a larger organization at the time. But over time, I think it was determined that in 1977, actually, they felt the need to create a society that was really focused on the unique needs of researching the lives of the formerly enslaved, as well as free people of color. And the records that were created in those social political environments when, as our ancestors existed. So, you know, I've listened to our remaining living founders discuss this many times, with the need to really focus on the specific records and the specific needs of African American research as opposed to something broader. And I'll leave it at that.
And which also says, because there was the lack of that being,
Yes,
and also access to whatever might have been there as well.
it was,
So, and we recognized James Dent Walker
yes,
as one of the founders, and there is a national chapter out of DC after his name, I
right,
believe. Okay.
yes,
So,
yes.
Dr. McDowell.
Well, I'm going to tell you about a personal reason
Mhm.
why it was started, and then how it branched out.
Okay.
So, you know, ever since I was a little girl, I was plagued by this question, you know, why are African Americans, why do we live in separate places? I was a little girl and I lived on Cleveland, Ohio. It's a very segregated city. Why are Black people living on the east side? And why do people who are, identify as white live on the other side? And why do we seem to be at these discouraging statistics? We seem to be having the highest poverty rate and highest dropout rates and incarceration rates. And these are things that I wondered about maybe since I was a child. And I didn't really get a full answer until I started to work on my family tree. And I started to see the timeline of my family, and I compared to the timeline of the United States and its founding. And when I compared my family and what happened to them at the same time of what's going on in the United States, it became very clear to me that it had nothing to do with the color of my skin, but it had everything to do with it, if you will. Our society, I found out, because we didn't learn a whole lot about slavery. We didn't learn a lot about African Americans in the founding of the country, which is, I'm so excited with what Rick is doing. We just didn't have this information. We are, invisible in a history of this country. So when I started to see this, and I started to see even in my own family, how my father, could barely read and write. How could this happen? He grew up in the South, in Alabama, and they had segregated school systems and didn't give funding to the African American schools. So, and then, of course, I go back even further, finding out, I found over 37 enslaved people in my family. And, and how how slavery started, and how even after slavery, it kind of continued. And then we had the civil rights movement. And even today, I would argue, we still have not gotten to a place where African Americans are respected for the contributions they have made to this country, and just being humans in a lot of respect. So the organization was started to encourage more people to do this work, to do and find their ancestors and tell their stories, because we believe your ancestor is just as important as Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass. The stories of your ancestors are our history, and we must tell this history. And who better to do it than the descendants? So that's why the organization was founded, and that's what it continues to do today.
And why it, not why, but the U.S. Middle Passage, are we looking just domestically, just in this country, as far as people becoming members? So we're not talking about transatlantic slave trade. We are talking about what happens in, I'm going to say, British America to the United States of America. Okay, great. Yes, I just want to make sure we're okay with that. Okay, and thank you.
Now we're hoping that maybe
one
day that the organization could grow and we can have branches internationally, but we are singularly focused on what happened here in the United States and its colonial days.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. I am a member, as well as Rick, and also of the Sons and Daughters of the U.S. Middle Passage. And one of the things was just to be able to tell that story about that person, you know. So I'm going to turn it over to Rick.
When I say it's an honor to be here, I want to make clear that the Sons and Daughters of the Middle Passage and AAHGS, the Afro-American Historical Genealogical Society, we are truly sister organizations in terms of our mission, in terms of our focus. I was the first registrar for Sons and Daughters and understood the importance of documentation. I had the unique opportunity in 2019, and it really went back to 2016 on behalf of AAHGS, was to crisscross the country and talk about the arrival of the first documented Africans in 2019, because, I'm sorry, 1619, because 2019 was the 400th commemoration. I liken this to going into the store and buying a jigsaw puzzle and looking at the beautiful picture on top of the jigsaw puzzle. Then when you open it up, you've got thousands and thousands of pieces that you have to piece together. And what I learned, particularly during the experience of the 400th commemoration, of how our ancestors were intact families back in the motherland, and when they were kidnapped, placed on slave ships, and brought here, they became thousands and thousands of jigsaw puzzle pieces. And it really is a story for lineage societies to bring those pieces together and document them. Piece by piece, bringing our families back together. So as a society of the first African Americans of English America, our objective is to take those distinct jigsaw pieces and piece the family back together and document it, have somebody review it through peer review and certify it, and bring our families back together, make them whole. And everyone has heard me say over and over and over again, my ancestors speak to me, and they're restless. They want their families to come back together. So that's what we do. That's what we all do in our own different ways, collectively and individually. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you. And we understand each of these groups have missions and visions. But I want to ask this question to each of you. And to me, it sounds like I'm going to say it because it's a personal question to you. And that's about the significance of these organizations and thinking of the members and what the members are bringing to the organization. So why is it essential for African Americans? But I'm going to add something to that, and also white Americans. why is it significant or essential for them or for us or these agencies to be a dedicated platform for people to be able to document and submit and trace their lineage and their ancestry? And I'll just go back to LaJoy.
Well, I think having a platform dedicated to African American genealogy really allows us to focus on those record sets that are of interest to our members, and to kind of ferret out what I call the nuances of African American genealogy that are sometimes missed. I've seen them misinterpreted and overlooked when you do research in a broader context. And we really do also have to include those social political environments, as I indicated earlier, that our families were in. Our goal is that to help people learn how to do this, to provide you with the knowledge to do those research techniques, to learn those methods and strategies, to determine what records are best for you. There are some records that we want to really kind of hone in on, and we need, as you say, to understand them. And we're constantly learning and ferreting out new aspects of records and looking at things in a different way and making discoveries all the time. So I think it is important. And I think it has been extremely helpful. I always love it when I hear our members say being part of AAHGS has allowed them to discover their family, to learn various aspects of African American history that they did not know before. So for us, it provides that also a safe space, if I can say that, for hard discussions and for being able to discuss the emotional side of all of this of the genealogical journey that we are embarking on.
Anything you want to add there, Dr. McDowell?
Yeah, I am just, in awe again of seeing LaJoy and Rick on this call, because they are so integral into what Sons and Daughters is trying to do. I mean, when we first rolled out Sons and Daughters, we came to an AAHGS conference. It was in Virginia. It was the first time we rolled it out. That's where I met Rick, I think. Oh, no, I met Rick before that. Rick and I are very close to another Lineage society. But the significance of these societies, or the Lineage society in particular, is that it gathers people who are also focused on our mission, which is specifically on enslaved people. And it gathers all of these people together. We support each other through our conferences, that we support each other through other ways of reaching out to the public. And and Rick mentioned it's kind of like a sister brotherhood, and it is. And even with our members, many of our members are members of AAHGS. AAHGS provides a platform for us. I don't know where this organization would be without AAHGS. And as Rick has mentioned earlier, that he was our first registrar, laid down the foundation of that part of our organization. And again, I don't know what this organization would look like without people like Rick, who helped us start it up, and all of our many members coming together to support this organization. So it is very, very significant. And as you mentioned, why is it significant to people who identify as white? And the reason why I use that word is because, as we know, race is a social construct, and people sign up to be included as a particular race. And it's important to them because it is their history too. Especially when you look at American history, if you call yourself an American, you need to know how America was started. Right. And you're missing so much of the story without having understanding of American slavery and American chattel slavery, and how and what an impact it made on this society. If it wasn't for American chattel slavery, what would this country look like? I have no idea. It wouldn't be what it looks like today.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. And Rick, the significance for the society, and you've mentioned a few things, but why is that so important? And I must say, as an African-American, that I should be part of your society. What's the significance? And I do want to throw one thing back to LaJoy. The big thing personally for me on AAHGS is the networking. And I think that Dr. McDowell, said some of that, but I'm using the word networking. We're also connecting with family.
Yes.
And we're talking about that disconnect and the coming back in these organizations. And my personal view, and this is why I belong to them, because I'm with family. And so I'm going to turn it over to Rick now for the significance.
It's always an honor to be in a panel like this with LaJoy and Evelyn, because you can see the scholars in them in terms of their response and their carefulness in replying to the question. And it always makes it very difficult for me to come behind them. But I want to focus on the nuance of what you discussed. And for me, my genealogical journey, I thought initially was very unique. I was able, through the land records, trace my ancestry all the way back to the arrival of the first Angolans that arrived in 1619. I felt that was so unique. But more important than that, I felt it was very important that I share that knowledge and that documentation with my African brothers and sisters. Many have heard me say that we, Americans of African descent, are the second indigenous people of this country, because 3/4 of our ancestors were here at the founding of the nation. And it's so important that we begin to realize that even though the history books have focused our attention to the Civil War as if that's when our existence began, we're now beginning to find out that's not the case. So it's very important that Americans of European ancestry begin to understand that we were here at the very founding. We were here during the French and Indian War. We were here during the Revolutionary War. We were here at every aspect of the founding of this nation, and our ancestors, whether they were free or freed or enslaved, were major contributors to the establishment of the nation and the founding of the nation. So it's not just important for us to document this, it's also important for us to tell the story of our ancestors, the historical importance, and how African American history is important, but how important we are to American history, and we are American history. So it's important that our story be told. Now, the lineage societies that Evelyn and I represent, it's equally important that not just LaJoy and her phenomenal membership talk about history and genealogy. It's important for Evelyn and I to document their lineages, because we always have people question, how can you document someone to the 1800s, 1700s, let alone the 1600s? And when we bring that documentation forward out of the colonial records, it changes the narrative. So when we hear someone say, why don't you go back to Africa? Or when they say, why don't you go back to where you came from? I say, Virginia. And when did your people come here? And tell me your story. So we're always put on the defensive. Now it's an opportunity for us to explain who we are and stop being defensive and be offensive on the offense in terms of this is who we are and this is the importance of our ancestry. And that's why I think the question was a very good one, and the nuance of that question, because again, this is, as Evelyn said, an American story.
And it gives the opportunity to correct things that are incorrect or what was also left out.
Yes.
And I believe Evelyn remarked about not hearing things in history or learning in school. They were left out. And this is a great opportunity for people to tell that story on their family. So let's talk a little bit about records and support. Do your groups offer any tools or support to individuals that are looking to do this? And LaJoy, you mentioned AAHGS focus as education. I get that, you know, you guys are there, but are there any resources and things that you can say AAHGS offers to people to help do this research?
Well, I was thinking about that. You know, for us, primarily, that from a national standpoint, that comes through presentations and workshops and seminars and things of that nature. But with the 31 chapters we have on the ground, they have the ability to do a bit more. Not more than they do a bit more brick wall sessions. They do a lot more hands-on workshops. We know that in New York, for example, they're going to do a leads, the leads, what do you call it?
Technique.
Yeah, the leads technique. I'll call it technique for genetic genealogy, but they're going to do it live. They said with paper and colored markers, because not everybody does things on a computer. Whereas in some of the types of presentations and workshops we have, they're very specific. They take you from point A to point B. They show you how to do things. And a lot of that happens on the local level. We're working to do more on the national level. We do have online resources on our national website, but we're retooling our whole national online presence. So when you come back to us in 2024, you'll see more information that will be more useful and easier for you to use, and things that you can, resources that you can go right to that can help you. Now, right now we have, there is an older document that steps you through how to do African-American genealogy, but we're going to update all of that. We're in the process of doing that in a way that we want people to be able to come and say, okay, this is how I get started. Yeah. It may take a little bit more time to ferret the records, but we hope to provide more virtual programming, more technique programming, so that people can learn the more methods and strategies, learn how to look at these records in a different way. But a lot of that also is done on that local level. And I hope I'm not, and you know, like
no, I think you hit right on the point.
Yeah, and we do have these groups that come together and we talk to each other. And as you say, that we network, we have special interest groups and various chapters. And so the goal is for us to come together, kind of do this together in a way that we help each other.
Yes. And I'm going to throw this right. And just to make Rick feel a little better, let's let him go next, and then I'll have you go next. So Rick, comment on the society.
Well, you know, the three organizations work well together. And we try not to replicate or duplicate the expertise of the organizations. And AAHGS does such a phenomenal job in terms of helping folks understand how to start at square one, and how to move along in the journey from a genealogical perspective. It does a phenomenal job of introducing historical concepts and how the family fits into that. And Sons and Daughters does an excellent job in terms of helping folks make that first benchmark in terms of genealogical research. And Evelyn will explain more about that. We're somewhat different. When individuals come to us, they already have that long knowledge after being with AAHGS. They understand how to do the genealogical work after being with Sons and Daughters. So when they come to us, they already have the genealogies in place. They've got the paperwork in place. So our conferences are a little bit different than AAHGS, a little bit different than Sons and Daughters. And we're not at the point yet. We're the infant of the three groups. We intend to have a robust database of all of these ancestors going back to the 16 and 1700s. And at some point in time, make it substantially easier for folks to be able to connect to those databases and provide those family lineages already done. So we're not there yet. We've only been in existence since 2019, which seems like, it's 5 years ago, but we didn't start doing the family genealogies until a couple of years ago. Our genealogist general is a phenomenal person, understands this concept. So we're hoping that within the next 2 or 3 years that we will be able to provide a very robust database of these family genealogies. So if you can get to a certain point in time and connect to that name, we're going to take you back to the 1700s and in the 1600s.
Dr. McDowell.
Yeah, we're also working on our database as well to put all of this together. But as far as how we support anyone who wants to do this work, I think, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to put it out there. I think joining these lineage societies, Sophia and Sons and Daughters, is probably one of the more difficult societies to join, because we have to navigate through a period of history where human beings were treated like cattle, like they weren't humans. That, they didn't even have last names. Well, on document. I mean, many of our ancestors had last names, but they just weren't recognized. So so it's a difficult way of, a difficult journey, could be difficult. And I believe it is. However, places like, we always send people to AAHGS for a beginning, to start off with the general, the general beginnings of how do you do genealogy. We also talk about it at our conferences. So we're getting ready to do our 8th conference is coming up in June 7th and 8th. And we have always, in every conference, we start off we have a session helping people with the basics of genealogy. On our website, we're updating it constantly, having links to different resources. But there are so many good resources. We are also updating it so that any place, we're identifying places where other organizations like Family Search and so many other, Maggie. Oh my goodness! I hope you get a chance to.
I'm going to say something about Maggie in a minute.
Yes. So Maggie, and other institutes that are put together, and they focus specifically on African American genealogy. So we support those organizations where we can, what other place? We do a lot. If you go to our website, you will see a lot of resources already there. We even have a YouTube page. We have a TikTok page where people, we chime in and we tell you a little bit about this history. We try to provide as many resources as we can. Our website is pretty, it's not as good as we want it to, because we're working on it. It changes all the time. So that's where I'll end it here.
Okay. So, and you got a perfect segue to the next question. But for those that don't know who Maggie is or what Maggie is, it is the Midwest African American Genealogy Institute. It is specifically educational, and it's geared towards teaching people and helping people with methods and strategies towards African ancestry. And they're the only institute in the country that makes that focus. They've been around, 11 years was completed in 2023, and of course ramping up for 2024. And I won't make any announcements at the moment. Just stay tuned, because it'll be coming out in a few days about 2024. But we are, there's different tracks. It's a 3-day genealogy institute, and people take 12 classes over those 3 days. and it's been virtual since COVID. So anyway, I'm going to move right in because Dr. McDowell, you opened up for the next question talking about the challenges. And good Lord, anyone that does African American ancestry knows we're going to be faced with challenge. So coming back, and I'll go right back to you and then go to Rick and LaJoy on how we know we face these unique challenges such as slavery, immigration, and so forth. So how do you think that the society, your group can assist members getting through some of these challenges? Yes, we know about the resources, but we also know a lot of people using just online doesn't always work or help, you know. So I'll come right back to you, Dr. McDowell, and then go to Rick about the challenges, overcoming them.
Well, I do want to say at this point about if you do apply, we hope many people will apply to our organization. Even if some people don't, even though we are like probably the first go-to for many African Americans, and in terms of joining Lineage Society, we still get applications where people are not able to get their evidence. They don't have all the evidence. But our registrars, Renata Sanders and Margot Lee Williams, are two registrars right now. Rick has said he was one, he was, definitely. And LaBrenda Garrett Nelson was also one. We've got other ones. Boy, their names are escaping me right now. But the great thing about applying is that even if you run into a problem, our registrars are awesome. They will identify where there are some gaps and work with that applicant to overcome some of the problems. But the other great thing about starting to join with Sons and Daughters, one of the things that really helps people is the knowledge of the history of slavery. And we encourage you to know about the history of slavery in that particular area. In Alabama, for example, they had a law that basically kicked out any free people. So even though we try to make it easier for people by telling them to look at that history, because if your family was you can identify a family member who was born after they kicked out all the free people, then most likely your person was also enslaved. We also tell people about negative evidence, and we talk about this at our conferences and how you can overcome some of these challenges of African American genealogy. And we work with people who are experts, expert genealogists. We invite them to our conference, and they put on sessions that help people. And as I mentioned, many of our members are members of AAHGS, and they have gone through the school of AAHGS, and they are able to help people. So there are a lot of, the other big thing we do is we promote books on genealogy. We give out book awards every year. And if you go to our website, you can see some of the book awardees. And a lot of them are genealogy books. So, and we give out awards to people who do this work as well. And you can go to our website and see the number of people. We have 2 people right now on this call, Dr. Murphy and Rick as well, who were awardees of Sons and Daughters. So anyway, I could go on. We do a lot to try to help.
Yeah, and you're making a good point. And I want to make this to the audience about books. In AAHGS, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna say something for LaJoy, but AAHGS recognizes book authors as well.
Sure.
But for me as a teacher, I go see what other people have successfully went through and said, can I use that same strategy or method on my research? So I think reading folks' books about their stories, you know, their family, their challenges, and working through them helped me become a better researcher, because you want to know as much as you can to work through those challenges. So I'm going to throw it to Rick, because his era is totally different than the era for the sons and daughters as far as what the society looks at. So talk to you what's available about helping people overcome the challenges.
I want to first thank Evelyn for mentioning Maggie, and I want to thank Shelley as the founder of Maggie, the institute that helps folks understand how to do their genealogical research. So Shelley, thank you for that. I also want to say that, again, the three organizations, we collaborate well. As we look at the challenges of doing African-American research, and Evelyn was correct, our ancestors were nothing more than chattel property. And the likelihood of finding genealogical research on a chair or a horse or a cow, as bizarre as that may sound, that's how our ancestors were treated. And you don't find them with surnames in most records. You only find them in first names. I'm working on a major project with the National Park Service and have the great honor of working with AAHGS. Equally important, I'm working with the Prince George's chapter of AAHGS. And we were challenged to find enslaved ancestors and their present-day descendants. And we all came up with the same concern, that we find first names and not last names. And we were absolutely amazed that we've taken this research to the early 1700s. We looked for slave listings, and you'll find the names, first names, no last names. But then we started to see certain things that came up in other records. For example, when someone ran away, there was always an ad placed in the newspaper, and all of a sudden you find that person's last name. Oftentimes you'll now see them in the family unit with just their first names. Now you have the last name of that 1760, 1770 family. Many times they will say son of. So now we know we're with the right family. We'll see where certain members were manumitted, and they'll have the names in the manumission documents. We know that many of the counties required free people to certify themselves, and we're beginning to find the names of the family units. We also know that our ancestors were more valuable enslaved than they were free. And they were valuable because they were used as assets for bank loans. So we look for those land records, and we always find our ancestors in those land records. And when we look at those bank loans, oftentimes we see the value of the ancestor, and we see their first name and their last name, because the bank wanted to be able to ascertain the true value of that asset. So slowly but surely, that onion, which oftentimes when we take off that outer skin, it causes us to tear up. But after a while, when we begin to peel it layer by layer by layer, we stop weeping, and we begin to benefit from the fruit and the true fruit of our efforts, and we're finding those ancestors. So many of us thought that that information and documentation didn't exist. Wow, oh wow, are we finding otherwise? So Shelley always talks about that brick wall. I don't believe in the brick wall. I believe in shattering that glass, and we are shattering it piece by piece. And those pieces, again, are the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, and we're piecing them together. Challenge? Yes. Impossible? No.
Every Friday night. that Friedman Barrel record collection is key on breaking those walls down. And before I go to LaJoy, I'm going to say something. Don't believe that brick wall story that's been plaguing us for 20, 30, 40 years, that African Americans cannot find their ancestors prior to 1870 federal population census.
Mhm.
It is happening every day. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna almost say every hour on the
That's
hour.
right. That's right.
We are in there, and now we are even back into the 18th century
Mhm.
as well, and
Mhm.
more to come. And hold on, because it's happening. And the thing of it is, it's really now, folks knew, but now we have access.
Yes.
And I think, go ahead, Rick.
And I don't want to cut in on LaJoy's time.
LaJoy.
Go right ahead.
But not only that, not only are we finding the records,
Yeah.
we're also finding the slave ships that our ancestors came on, as
Yes.
bizarre as that may sound.
Mhm.
And we're also finding the area of the mother country that our ancestors came from. And in our society, we have a woman who discovered 12 ancestors who served in the Revolutionary War. And we're also finding that their ancestors who served in the Revolutionary War were born in Africa, and they're finding the documentation. And she has found the actual tribe in which her ancestors came from through DNA.
Yeah.
And it sends chills up our spines every time we hear this. So Shelley is absolutely correct. It's not every month. It's not every week. It's not every day. Almost every hour, folks are finding their ancestors because the ancestors are restless and they want to be found. Sorry, LaJoy.
No.
Go for it, LaJoy.
Well, I don't know that I can. They said everything already, but I will say that, no, really. And for AAHGS, of course, we do have educational programming. We have I'm going to continue to say at the national and local level that actually can help you with your slave era and antebellum and hopefully colonial research. We're focusing on those things. I also say that we have publications. Our members write. And we have others. We invite others to write for our AAHGS News and for our AAHGS peer-reviewed journal. So if you read some of those articles, it also gives you insight on surnames and locations and family stories, as well as the peer-reviewed journal that actually kind of takes you through the process of how people get from A to Z. I will also say that I would thank Rick for being the impetus behind our International Book Awards, and that we started. And we have a variety of categories of awardees for books that are given every year. And we also acknowledge people who have done great work in the genealogy and historical arenas every year. We've been doing that for quite some time. So I think that we all, as we say, build on each other. And I've known for a long time that so-called brick wall no longer is. One of our members and presenters extraordinaire Robin Smith always says, "Do you really have a brick wall?
Right.
Is the
Or are
is the
you
wall there?
creating
Are
it
you the
yourself?
wall? Are you
Are you
the
the
person that
wall?
has put up the blinders that won't
Yes.
allow you to see it?" So the goal is for people to think out of the box,
Yes.
to look at records in a different way. To when you say, well, I was looking the other day, well, you can't find a death certificate, but this person was the last seen in this census. And there was a sheriff's sale of their property because they were dead 2 years later. So you now know that person died between 1880 and 1882. So let's look at when the census occurred and when the sheriff notice went out, and it even narrows the window. And so it can help you do a little bit more research. Things like that. And so we recognize, and I will always say thank you to Maggie for developing the kind of courses that you have and that people take. We also know there are other institutes out there that now have African American tracks, but it's all a good learning experience. And
Sure.
but the idea is to be able to take what you learn and apply it to your own personal research, and also reach out to others. And you kind of bounce the ball back and forth and talk to people about that research. And so that you can begin to have a broader perspective of how to go about getting to the time period, that the colonial period that Rick focuses on. Because I agree. The
And it-
1790 census has 1 million enslaved people and about what 25,000 or so free people of color. We were
Yeah.
here. That 1 million people didn't all just come over on. That's generations of people who were here, not
Generation.
necessarily people who just, because we know there's no evidence that a million people were brought here, based on even everything. Even if people went to the Caribbean first, the documentation shows about what 300,000 to 500,000. But yet in 1790 there were 1 million enslaved people here. That's generations of people.
And
I
let's not
want people to
forget
understand
Spanish
that, you know.
Florida,
Yes, and Florida, which was
thousands
before.
in
Yeah,
Spanish Florida,
right.
and
1500s, 1400s, St.
not
Augustine.
being accounted for.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So this is the great opportunity. I do want to acknowledge that some of the Maggie instructors are actually in the chat.
Yes, I saw that.
Nada Yarborough Sanders is there, and Shannon Christmas, and they are instructors, as well as Rick Murphy as
And
well.
Bernice Bennett is there.
Huh?
I saw Bernice there. Bernice
And
Bennett.
Bernice Bennett, and I want to comment before we go to the last question. And Bernice had perfect timing, because you both talked about the books and Rick talked about his book. And I want to acknowledge the trailblazing of Bernice Alexander Bennett and the Black homesteaders,
Yes.
and the Black homesteaders of the South. She has empowered hundreds of us to tell the stories. And I'm going to say it this way, that Black folks own their land from
Yes.
the Homestead Act of 1862. And that recent book that's out right now, Black Homesteaders of the South, there's 49 different stories of the descendants telling about their families that own land from the 1862. We're thinking wartime. 1862 Homestead Act. So kudos to all of the authors that are out there and things. So let me turn this around and kind of wrap it up. We talked about collaboration. We talked about education. We talked about the challenges, resources, support, the importance and significance of each of your organizations. So now let's think about future endeavors. What do you want people to take away? What are the future goals of your organization? How do you envision it expanding or evolving in the coming years? Because you know the country has challenges, and we're part of that challenge. And so to each of you, take the time to explain, and then we'll go to Q&A. Whatever the future goals are for the organization that will contribute and enhance your missions. And I'm going to go to LaJoy first, and then Dr. McDowell, and then Rick. I'm going to have you bring it up on the end there, and then we'll go to Q&A if there's any. LaJoy?
Our goal is to be a bigger and better AAHGS, to be the premier African-American genealogy society in the United States. It's simple as that. You know, we want to increase our educational offerings. We want to strengthen our local chapters. We want to develop more meaningful partnerships. You know, we want to be the go-to organization at the national level for people who are seeking to learn how to do African-American genealogy. And we want to serve as a vehicle for those who want to elevate their family history through publications, presentations, maybe even videos and films. You know, we're trying to go there. That's where we want to go. We are, as I said, we are totally retooling our online presence, which we will introduce in 2024. We're hoping to develop some forums, online forums within that platform, so that people can connect even more with each other. If the pandemic has done nothing for us, it's allowed us to be in California and in Massachusetts and in Maryland and in Georgia, and to be able to talk to one another and to connect with each other and find connections, family, DNA, and etc. So a bigger and better AAHGS is where we want to be.
Sounds good. LaJoy? I'm sorry, Dr. McDowell.
Okay. You know, we've mentioned, I've mentioned a couple things so far. You know, we are working on our database. You know, I get excited thinking about that database, especially with what Rick is doing. If we are able to bring in all these data, all this data together, we may probably be one of the, we are already at the top of those institutions that have focused on African American genealogy and have all of these families already connected. I can't think of any other organizations that would have access to this kind of data specifically on our families outside of course, ancestry.com and family search, but where can you go to have a specific focus on African American families, and putting together this database just really would be such a gift to the world, and I hope that we'll be able to do this pretty soon. Of course, we need funding, and we didn't talk about that, but that's always a big problem for African American groups, is getting access to those kind of funds. But we're going to do what we can to put them together. We're also working on a journal. We on December 31st, we're going to put out the call for a journal. It's going to be a collection of biographies of people who were enslaved and their family group sheet. Along with any other information, we're encouraging people who want to write poetry about African American slavery, and our focus is on African American slavery. So if you have artwork, poetry, short stories, we want this journal to be a collection of these things, but it's mainly going to be biographies of people who were enslaved, because we want 10 million of them. Okay. So the other thing is we want new members. We just opened up our membership to children. So you can be 5 years old and be a member of this organization. We just opened it up, and we're expanding that way as well. And we want everybody to be together in one big family. The lineage societies, the children are different. Men are by themselves and women are by themselves. We are one big family, and we want to encourage more families to join. So those are some of the major ones. Of course, we got our conference coming up again on June 7th and 8th. And so we're looking forward for people to be involved.
Awesome. Rick?
I want the audience, those who are online and those who are at the museum, to know a couple of things. Number one, it really is an honor to work side by side with LaJoy and Evelyn. We really work together in partnership. And oftentimes you don't see that with African-American organizations, but we want to prove those other folks wrong. We come from a very small knit community, and I want the museum to know how fortunate that they have Brian as a leader there at the museum. We know him, we respect him, and we know he will take the museum to levels that they never even thought of. Very, very important. I also want to say that we talked about books, and that Bernice Bennett, the godmother of all of us in terms of her work at the National Archives, in terms of her work around writing, and what she did with her book is phenomenal. And we talked about journals. The Society of the First Africans of English America, we launched our first journal last year. It's a genealogical journal, but we also include, and we honor forgotten patriots, and we also honor great authors. And I don't want anyone to know this, because I'm telling you a secret. And it's very important with this secret that our journal is going to be coming out this year, in the next couple of weeks. And we're going to honor Bernice Bennett and doing a bio on her book, as well as Angela Walton. So it's important that the world know that we recognize the work of great authors, and we recognize not only the work of great authors, but those who want to enlighten us. So we find that to be very, very important. So I don't want anyone to whisper that, because it hasn't hit the press yet. So it's important we keep that quiet. The other thing is, in our journal, we want to make sure that we're building out these family lines, and it's peer review. So it's very, very important. We also have an annual conference, and AAHGS does one of the best conferences you can imagine as well as sons and daughters. Ours is a little bit different. It's really more like a summit where we take challenges and how do we turn these challenges around. And our next conference is going to be on April 26th and 27th at the Museum of American Revolution in Philadelphia. And it's going to be a very much a small environment. So when we open up that gate for tickets, don't wait, because we had a lot of angry people last year that they wanted to attend, but they weren't able to. And last, as you talk about what we're going to do in the future, we just launched the Forgotten Patriots Project. So if you want to know more about that, go to www.sofafea.org on your AM dial. I'm sure somebody will put it in the chat, sofafea.org. And if you go to the middle of our website, in the middle tab, you'll see a tab called Forgotten Patriots. And it's our intent to do a virtual museum. We're going to document every one of those 6,631 men, women, and children who served in the Revolutionary War, freed and enslaved. We're going to put down information in terms of their service. We're going to talk about where they came from. We're going to talk about where they died. We're going to talk about the military units they were in. We're going to talk about their achievements as military men, because they were the founders of America. So we've learned from the expertise of AAHGS, and we don't want to say we plagiarized, but we know we're learning from them in terms of moving forward. We know we learn from Sons and Daughters, United States Middle Passage, and we're going to hit the ball out of the park. So we want to make sure that the next generation comes along, they can stand on our shoulders as I stand on theirs. Thank you. And Brian, wish you luck. Hit the ball out of the park.
Yes, thank you for that.
And I mentioned that we're also working on America 250.
Yes,
That we're all focusing on that. So
we're all working on it.
Yep.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So Whitney, if you're there, I see there's 2 questions, and I can answer that second one, but go for the questions that are in the chat. And folks, if you've got a question for someone on the panel, put it in the Q&A right quick, because we're wrapping it up.
Yeah, so one of the questions we got was, what online resources have you developed to help potential applicants complete their Lineage Society applications?
And I can give that, I'm going to throw that to Rick right quick, because I believe Dr. McDowell mentioned their application to the Lineage Societies, and LaJoy can respond as far as membership to AAHGS. So Rick, because on Sophia's website, there's a walk through steps.
Well, I think, and if I may, on behalf of LaJoy and Evelyn,
Sure.
because we all would have the same response.
Okay.
We each have very robust websites that include information on how to fill out genealogical paperwork. We each talk about the importance of primary source information. We include information about how to document your ancestors in terms of the name, their date of birth or marriage or death. We each talk about the importance of collecting primary source documentation from the individual city or town or village, the county within the state, and the state itself. So I'm familiar with AAHGS' website. They have extensive information on how to document your lineage. Evelyn has done a phenomenal information in terms of explaining how to fill out the lineage application for her society, and we do the same for Sons and Daughters, for the Society for the First African Americans.
Did you guys want to add anything to it, or just go to the next question?
You can go to the next.
Yes.
Okay,
Right here.
great. Whitney, I think there was another question from the audience at the museum.
Yes, they're wondering, is there a Black genealogy certification course?
Yeah.
Certification. Stay tuned. I'm gonna just say that. Stay tuned. That's all I'm gonna say. And it's a great question. Appreciate it.
It
And
is.
stay tuned.
Sounds good.
Yes. Any other questions? And A lot of accolades in the chat, and panelists, you're welcome to glance through them. And the names of the organization, because that's a question that's in the chat, is the Sons and Daughters of the United States Middle Passage. And you can Google to go right to that if you didn't catch the links that were put in there. And also AAHGS stands for Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society. And then we have the Society of the First African Families of English America, because someone had asked for the names of the three organizations. I'm going to say thank you. I think it was a great session. We had some good questions, and I think we gave out a lot of good information.
Yes.
Hopefully people will recognize the three groups here as a place to tap into, become members of, and if not a member, donate or support what's going on, and go to the web pages. We appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you. And what's the date for January, Whitney? January the 6th?
Yes, January 6th at 1 p.m.
1 p.m. We will have descendants of the Clotilda group to come on and talk about that. So we thank you from the museum and the Center for Family History.